Next is Three Simple Steps. It's another one that I know I annually return to that always find some nuggets or jewels that are helpful, as I reflect and, think about this life as an adult.
Mhm. My work for my reading work for the summer is I have a stack of old New Yorkers that's about this tall. And every week I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get to that article. I'm going to get to that article. And that's my goal for the summer is to just get through those.
The articles, amazing, amazing. You have a couple folks who will be reading your book already. We didn't even have to do the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Please let us know what you think.
Yeah. Summer beach reading.
And I don't know if you have three exclamation points and a happy face at the end of your title, but I love that that's been included.
It's a good look.
Right. And it's on its way to Ireland. Thanks, Trudy.
That's awesome.
We have a couple minutes till we get started. So as folks are entering, please feel free to say hello to us in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. If you have a favorite summer book you might be reading, I guess you don't know if it's your favorite yet. If you have a summer book you may be reading, that might become a favorite. Fabian, do you mind? I see Edgar in the room. Can you promote him, please? Ooh, pool time sounds lovely, Sherry.
Mm.
And Trudy has the stack of books, journal articles, and podcasts. I love the multiple means.
Nice.
Oh, the Huberman Lab is a great podcast. In fact, one of my favorite neuroscientists, Mary Helen Inmordino Yang, did a
Mm.
great episode on the Huberman. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name quite correctly, but so yes, if you like neuroscience and you like the Huberman Lab, check out Mary Helen Inmordino Yang.
Good to know.
Oh, yes, and it's wintry in New Zealand. Carol, thank you for reminding us of
Reminder.
that. Well, it is 3 p.m. Eastern on the East Coast of the United States, which is where we are located. And I am so excited to already see and hear from folks from around the world who are joining us today. Thank you so much for joining. We are doing some just brief introductions if you'd like to share where you're zooming in from, even the time zone. Some of you are in the next day, some of you are in pajamas, perhaps ready to go to bed. Others of you may be just having lunch. We're so thrilled that you're here with us today. My name is Allison Posey, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this series. This is a series where we really try to explore the real world application of universal design for learning, which we'll now affectionately call UDL. And each episode, we get to bring expert voices from the UDL community to discuss strategies to create better learning for all. And I am beyond excited to get to be joined by the co-authors, and I am going to be so bold as to say visionary leaders. This book has inspired me in many ways. They've all been drawn to education. We'll have Mirko Chardin, Pamela Chu-Sheriff, and Edgar Vasquez. Just very briefly, and then I want to let them get into the conversation. Mirko is a Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer with Novak Education. He's the founding head of the Putnam Avenue Upper School in Cambridge, and co-author of the best-selling Equity by Design book, which is also another summer read you should put on your list. We have Pam, who leads programs across the country on UDL, restorative practices, equity, and school leadership. She's taught for over 20 years, was a school leader in the Boston Public Schools, provides anti-racism workshops for nonprofit organizations and universities, and is a board member of the Asian American Resource Workshop. I'm telling you, these are superheroes here today. And Edgar's here. We're so happy to see you. Has over 20 years as an exemplary educator, also in the Boston Public Schools. You all need to come join us here in Boston. He is a pioneer in the circle practice and restorative justice framework and implementation of these. He does workshops, trainings on dismantling the school to prison pipeline and is a school administrator at the only public art schools in Boston. So I'm so happy you all will get to experience their passions, their expertise today. So team, congratulations on your book, Restorative Practices That Heal School Communities. And the discount code is coming for the listeners. And I just want to share, I know I've mentioned this to you, but I feel as though I know you all more after reading your book. You just have beautifully combined your stories with strategies, authentic student and teacher voices to share the powerful message we can heal our school communities. I'm getting goosebumps through restorative practices to develop a healthy community, culture, relationships, so we all thrive. So welcome, welcome. And Mirko, I'm gonna just let you kick us off today. Can you just share, say a hello, and what was your why for writing this book?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for all the just wonderful energy and support. I think it's incredible that we're here today with so many folks from across the globe acknowledging the possibility that we can heal our school communities, that we can actually get to a place of restoration if we acknowledge the human beings who our school communities are for, our students, our staff members, the human beings that make up those spaces. If we can put systems and structures in place that acknowledge that humanity and have the willingness to dig in with each other, we can make magic happen. And my colleagues will share a little bit about this and share a little bit about the fact that for us there's so much passion because it's not just about theory or ideas, but actually lived experience, and not only our own, but of collective examples of colleagues who've engaged in this work across the nation and world, who know that when we listen first and acknowledge the human capacity and capital that's before us, we can make dynamic changes a reality.
So beautifully shared. Pam, what's your why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's no more urgent time than now. Feels this country across the world, we just feel so fractured, so divided. And if we can give any schools, any adults, students, anyone some tools, some hope to be able to unite us, to build relationships and build community, this is just something that we'd like to share out with the world.
And Edgar, we have magic, tools, hope, humans. What would can you say a hello? And what is your
Yeah,
why?
yeah. Good afternoon, morning, evening to folks from all over. It's interesting. I always revisit the why every year because it allows me to be extremely reflective as to the purpose. And I think for me is I always put the student at the center, right? And if I don't prioritize the student, then I worry that others will have a hard time with prioritizing the student very holistically, right? So my why will always come to the student being at the center.
Mhm. Amazing. And along those lines, are there any real world stories, any practical moments that are ones that you want to raise to folks' awareness today as we're sharing and celebrating your book? Is there a story, an application that you'd just like to call out? And Pam, I'll start with you for this one.
Oh, sure. The story when we did workshops, even within our district, when we were still within the walls of Putnam Ave, is just one really powerful example. We had a student, I was in charge of discipline. Some incident happened. I get walkie-talkied. He gets sent to my office, and he had just cussed out this teacher, and he was someone who was never sent to the office. So we're all kind of in shock. And, of course, we need to hear his side, what happened. He was in a really bad mood, came into the classroom, threw his book bag down, didn't want to sit in his seat. Teacher kind of storms over, gets in his physical space, says, sit in your seat, becomes a power struggle. The student finally goes to sit in his seat, calls the teacher some choice language that I will not repeat on the webinar. The teacher was upset, threw that student's book bag on the desk, and it kind of whipped towards him, and then he got cussed out even more, right? So kind of shocked about what happened. Want to hear from the teacher as well. He was also upset. And I said, this on the outside, it could be, traditional schooling. Oh, a student is cussing out a teacher, then they get X, Y, and Z consequence, done, documented, and it's over. But really, it's what led up to it. How can we repair that relationship, just even in this small incident? So when I talked to that young man, he also said that there were a lot of things that were going on at home. We knew his older brother had been incarcerated. And he also just shared with me, he said, I have this teacher for advisory. I have this teacher for English. I feel like he targets me. He gives me a harder time than other teachers. And so I couldn't take it that day. I was already in a bad mood. He regrets it, but he also felt like he needed to do something in the mind of an adolescent reasoning. And then when I met with the teacher, I asked him, I was like, are you okay if I share that with the teacher? And he was okay with it. So I met with the teacher and just shared about the student's experience. And I said, are you willing for us to hold a restorative conference in my office? And the teacher was open. And when I talked to him and shared that feedback, I give it to that teacher. He was reflective. He's like, you know what? I do target that student. And I'm realizing I did that because I care about him. I see him so much during the week that I am a little bit harder on him, and I can see how that's not fair. And so what's important about these is, having a circle or having a restorative conference, mediation, whatever you want to call it. It's not just because you force two people into a room, but it's really they have to be willing. We have to do the pre-work to prep them to have that conversation, and then it becomes more powerful. So when we met, there's a process for how and when folks speak, but really practiced with that student and role played a little bit since he was a little bit nervous, but he had the floor to speak directly to that teacher about the harm that that teacher had caused him, right? Because his response was just the symptom, but the deeper root was that he was being targeted for whatever reason. And the teacher handled it beautifully. They both kind of committed to next steps, and then we were able to move on.
It's absolutely inspiring because this is hard and you really need to be vulnerable to hear some of the perspectives from the students and understand the context. And that can be very uncomfortable. Something I think I was often tended, I mean, I'm even physically wanting to shy away from it here. So how empowering to actually be able to have those conversations. I know you've mentioned circle practices. Edgar, is this something you can speak to a little so our audience can learn more?
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I'll respond to that question, but also let me add another great example of how you can apply circle practice. So initially, again, you want to utilize circles as another way to really engage all the voices in the classroom, including the teachers, right? So the teacher necessarily doesn't always have to facilitate the circle. It can always be another student who facilitates the circle because everyone's voice is then equal in this space. I'll give you a great example on how it is that you could apply it. Um, in Massachusetts, we're still doing the MCAS, the standardized test, right? And many students still struggle in, they have this anxiety of test taking, right? So you can utilize a circle to allow every voice to be heard in the space and allow each other to also give recommendations, advice, be supportive on strategies on how to test. But it creates a space where it's safe. Folks are able to be vulnerable, both students and teachers, because I've had instances where teachers have been so vulnerable that it develops a much more stronger sense of empathy and community between students and teachers that, believe it or not, at my school for many, many years, we've never had a student fail the ELA 10th grade MCAS test, right? And I will say that, always using these circles as a way to prepare students, whether it be emotionally, whether it be just for the sake of taking a test, it really helps encourage students to kind of like develop a sense of, that self-esteem, for it. So that's one, uh, experience around how do you apply circles. I mean, but I know at my school that we've utilized it for many other reasons as well. I would say maybe about 12 years ago, when our nation was going through the crises around police brutality in our communities. Many of my students, who are all Boston residents, were either victims, or if not, they've experienced it directly or indirectly. My teachers, similar, have either experienced it directly or indirectly. So we will hold these circles for students and staff alike to have an equal voice, where they can share experiences. They can also, be supportive to one another. And as a community, it strengthens the community, it strengthens the voice of the community as well. And we're able to also leave a circle space with the next steps. How do we as a community can empower our community? And yeah, so those are just some examples of it.
And Allison, if I may, I just want to add that, in both of the examples that we heard, the magic, the healing, the restoration, the positive results, they happen not simply because someone used a buzzword and said, hey, today's going to be circle time, or we're going to try restorative practice. They happen because restorative practices are actually about community building first. It's about the establishment of trust amongst your constituents. And it's that trust, if established proactively, that's one of the big similarities and connection to universal design for learning. We're talking about proactive work and being intentional about putting things in place that ensure that they're trusting relationships that allow us to have enough currency with one another, that when conflicts erupt, whether intentional or not, there's actually been enough trust that's been established to mitigate the impact of those conflicts. Sometimes I speak to colleagues who say, hey, this work, it's not real. I tried it. I didn't get to any results. And I'll realize in the midst of the conversation that the biggest misnomer or misstep was that there was no relationship amongst any of the individuals who were involved. And there was this assumption that just by saying the words without the work, that there would be a transformative experience. And I think at the core of this text, we certainly want to have it resonate for all loud and clear that to get the reward, we have to intentionally utilize mechanisms that establish trust in our communities, whether they be school districts, school buildings, or classroom communities.
And if I can piggyback on that too, sorry, Allison, I think you're about to speak, but another through line of our text is that restorative practices, they're not a discipline approach. When Mirko was saying, buzzword, restorative practices is one of the latest buzzwords, and I see it marketed all the time as, oh, a hack to classroom discipline or a classroom management technique. That is absolutely not what this is about. To put in that work, to build relationships, to build community is going to take time. And so, it's not easy, but just, UDL talks about this idea of design and planning and being proactive versus being reactive. And so our text really emphasizes that idea of the foundation of being able to develop SEL skills for even impacts on academic achievement really is in the work of building community relationships. For those neuroscience folks out there, we know that when that amygdala is hijacked and students don't feel safe, they are either in fight, flight, or freeze mode, that they won't be able to learn. And so when you can build a sense of community and a sense of safety, then their brains are prepped and primed for learning.
And that doesn't just apply to students. Sometimes as educators, we'll assume that these practices are magical and mystical for certain age groups, but that's not the case. No, they are vibrant, effective human communication strategies, which means they should be utilized amongst our adult staff and culture as well. If there's not the ability for the adults to actually be doers of the work by actually engaging in establishment of proactive, positive, authentic, real, genuine relationships with each other, then that becomes the biggest barrier towards implementing these practices with success with young people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the subchapters in our book is titled Magic Happens, but it's not a magic wand, right? So We'll see amazing things happen. There are mistakes along the way, of course. Let's also be real. There's no shame, blame, or judgment. And when we try things out, we're going to mess up. And even just naming that with adults, with kids, is another way to model vulnerability.
I'm appreciating all the neuroscience as a neuroscience nerd, and we know how much mirroring happens between humans. So it does make sense. I know, Edgar, when you were describing that the teacher's voice is in this with the students, we're also on that participation from all the humans, again, to keep, emphasizing that humanness is powerful. So I'm hearing this is not a checklist that we're just going to go do and then say, we've done it. So I'm interested a little. I know the three of you connected, Mirko and Pam, at your school, but then how did Edgar come into the story, and what was that connection like?
Well, we talking about vulnerability. What got us to this point was vulnerability. Pam and I had the luxury of leading a school community in the city of Cambridge, which was resource rich. We thought we had the right staff. We thought we had the right vision, ideals. We went through everything on our checkbook, the traditional one and the alternative one to build a healthy school community. But our school was anything but that. Staff were frustrated, students were frustrated, and authentically as the leader, I didn't know what was going on. I thought I did everything right, and the universe must just be against me. To get additional information, we surveyed our staff and students. Same questions, in hopes by triangulating the data, we'd find some insights. And one question in particularly changed everything for us. A question that asked, do students feel well known, treated with respect and dignity here? Overwhelmingly, over 80% of the staff, responded in agreement that they felt like it was a great place. They're here before school, after school. The kids just don't understand how wonderful this place is because they would have all loved to go here as students. The kids were overwhelmingly 80% in agreement to what they had to say, but it was at 180-degree different from what our adults said. They said that they did not feel well known, treated with respect or dignity, and that they hated it at the school. And sitting with that data, I often say it was like a gut punch. Many of us wanted to excuse it away. They're kids. Why are we listening to them? They're just trying to get a rise out of us. They're not saying the right things. But we had these core values about student voice, and students were at the center. So we had to sit with the data and not run from it. And what it brought to our attention was that we had no systems or structures, no mechanisms to actually ensure that student voice was at the center. It was just a nice thing to say as professionals and to pat our backs on, but we had no mechanisms that were actually safe for our students to share information with us. Now, we were aware of some dynamic work that was happening at the Boston Arts Academy. So we wanted to figure out how, one, we can make sense of the restorative systems that they had in place, and duplicate or reverse engineer some of that work at our school site. So we took it upon ourselves to connect with Edgar and to visit, the Boston Arts Academy to see what some of this work was that we were hearing about in person. And that experience was transformative. And I certainly won't speak for Pam, but I think we came to a quick agreement that we needed to bring this information back to our school community and that we couldn't in a traditional way. We couldn't just have our folks sit in a PD where people talked at them or gave them slides. But in order for the adults to understand how powerful this was, we were going to need to see if Edgar would be willing to come to our building and do some demonstrations with the adults. So it would really be learning about their experience if they had a powerful one. And then if their experience was actually powerful, figuring out how we duplicate that for our kids.
Edgar, as the magic wand, what what tips do you have, or what are some of the perspectives you bring when folks come to you with this kind of moment of, I see something amazing happening here. I observe it. I guess I want to be mindful, and we might experience it in multiple ways, not just through sight. Yeah, what did you bring to Mirko and Pam? What are some of the tips and tricks you bring to your sites?
A good question. I remember years ago, before Mirko or Pam brought me in, I was doing a lot of research around books on that, like training books, but also books that helped adults really understand the power of circles. right? And not just necessarily or specifically to restore harm, but just circles in general. And they weren't many books at the time. So now I'm creating a professional development workshop for a bunch of adults who are very unfamiliar to such native practice. And because I already had run a couple of other professional developments and workshop for students and staff in other settings, the most powerful thing for me was I need to be able to have the adults actually experience it rather than me teaching them the theory or explaining to them what's it like and what does it feel like. They actually have to go through the motions in the process and internalize all that in order for them to actually feel the power of sitting in a circle, getting to strengthen all of the SEO competencies, because all of the SEO competencies are present whenever you're running any type of circle, whether it be community strength circle or restorative circle, whatever the case may be. So for me, again, that was my preparation. That's kind of how I came in. I was like, the only way to make this extremely effective, they have to experience what circles are. And we ran a few of them. We ran, kind of like your tier 1 circle, nothing too, um, you know, uh, dangerous for them to kind of like just practice with. And then the other tier 2 and tier 3 kind of like really dug in a little bit more deeper for them to really understand, again, the power of what a circle can do.
And I'll just say, I still remember that day Edgar came into our staff meeting, and you never know what to expect when you're in a room full of adult learners. And even just that, it was an hour and a half staff meeting. It was so powerful. There was a group, they did a fishbowl circle, and the energy was just so powerful because just to have those moments of connection and to be able for teachers to also share their voice. And as Edgar said, that experiential learning can be the most powerful. And so when the adults experienced it in their bodies, and they were able to connect and share out and have their voices heard, that was so much more powerful than, here's an article to read about, the 5 bullet points of how this is effective. And that's what really won them over. And then from there, when we think about implementation, we always say start small, because I know there's sometimes a lot of excitement when you hear something that can be so impactful. But from there, and we talk about in our text about our implementation journey, but really just piloting with a small group of people, exploring, and then scaling up from there.
And so, how does UDL align? How do these two frameworks go together? Practice,
They
maybe.
they go together because you have to consider who the audience is and what the purpose of the practice is. You can't just grab it off the shelf and be like, hey, here it goes. You have to consider the human beings. There's immense planning that has to be involved in this. This is not just a split-second reactionary thing. It has to be about intentionality. And not just with the kids, with the adults as well. Through the practice, we are honoring and providing respect and dignity by taking into consideration who this is for and ensuring that we're communicating in our planning and our setup that this is a safe space for them, because we want it to feel like a trusting environment where individuals have the capacity to be vulnerable.
And in our text, we have a multi-page crosswalk of, UDL guidelines and the checkpoints that match with restorative practices. But even though we have that, it really is not, checkpoint, 7.3 perfectly aligns with this theory of restorative practice. It really is about just a framework. It is not just one specific strategy that you implement on Thursday at 3 p.m. It really is about a way of believing and being. And so it does, though, if you want to be very kind of technical about it, right? When we think about the principle of engagement, especially being able to welcome student interests and identities, when we think about being able to hear their voices, give them options and choices. Reflection is a huge part of especially tier one circle practice, restorative practices, being able to, if we even think about executive functioning, there are times you can just have a circle to plan and talk about, what are your goals for quarter 2 of this school year? So it really does, as all frameworks do, it really does just seep throughout so many pieces of UDL.
In the 3.0 guidelines, I love sharing this with folks or reminding them of this, explicitly states that the goal of UDL is learner agency. For me, that means giving a voice to the individuals who need it, the learners. And the focus of restorative practices are giving and restoring agency to individuals who don't continuously have it. And I think there's no greater tie-in than that. We're talking about giving voice and control back to individuals who need it so that they can advocate for themselves and ensure that the experience that they have is one that's being done with them and for them, opposed to one that feels like it's being done to them.
There are a couple questions here, and I know we just have a couple minutes, so this is like a 30-second round. So these are questions that I will say I'm not going to assume I know how our panelists are going to answer, but I'm guessing they're going to be answers that will be much more fully developed in the book. But a question is, how can I help and encourage from the outside, even as a parent who understands what's going on, but maybe you don't get as much support when you speak up? So do you have recommendations for folks who maybe are peripheral in the community, but maybe not embedded in the school?
Buy them a copy of the book. Ask them to run a book group with you. We're parents and community members. We're interested in these ideas, no shame, blame, or judgment. Is there a member of the staff who would like to read and chat with us about this? Let's engage them in the restorative process of inviting them in to having some conversations and to engage them from shared learning and see where the conversation takes us.
And ask questions about where are there structured or informal ways where parent voices can be included, because those don't always exist, or sometimes it's the parent voices that are the squeaky wheel or the ones that are the most well resourced. So even just being able to push back a little bit about what is the district or school's plan for how to include all voices of parents and community partners.
And there's a UDL moment. Voice could be in all kinds of ways and participation in all kinds of ways. So again, connections are there. Edgar, there's a question. Could you give a little, and again, this is like hard to do, I know, in the 30 seconds, basics of circles at the different tiers.
Sure. Again, the way I like to look at the different tiers is the tier one is kind of like low level, low risk, where you're building community, you're strengthening community. And some of the basic prompts will be, what are your favorite colors? Tell me your favorite story from your childhood. Kind of like low level, we're just introducing ourselves. And then tier two, when we utilize tier two circles, we're maybe kind of like addressing a little bit something more specific. And then tier three, that's when you're really now addressing harm. Right? So you want to reduce the harm. And at the tier three, you're really, putting both those that have been harmed and those that caused the harm in the same space, in the same room. But in order to get to a tier three circle, folks must have had the experience in tier one, or a lot of coaching needs to happen in order for them to access the tier three circle.
Super helpful, super helpful. So we are developing communities and relationships. We're preventing and repairing conflict and harm. We are reclaiming the narrative, and we are keeping students, learners, humans at the center. Do you have any final words? I know we are at our time. It goes so quickly. I encourage everyone to please buy the book. It will transform you and restore you. Restorative practices that heal school communities. There's a 30% discount. So that is good till the end of June. So please use that discount code and share it around. Spread those books around as you all are reading in the upcoming months. So any final words, Mirko, Pam, Edgar?
Conflict does not have to divide us if we choose to listen to each other and navigate through what we hear with no shame, blame, or judgment. Conflict can be the beginning and not the ending. And I think right now is the perfect time for us all to take this into consideration.
Thank you.
I'll just say finding an entry point that works for you, that works for your school, because again, there can be a lot of excitement around this. It can feel really overwhelming, but just again, there's no one size fits all model, as UDL notes. So find what is manageable and tangible for you and start there.
I think for me, it's I'll go back to, if we can all go back to when we were young in our very early stages of school, we all did circles in kindergarten, right? At the very low levels of grade school. We sat in circles, read books, sat in circles, talked about the weekend, sat in circles. We did all these circle practices as young learners and kids. Why do we need to walk away from those same circle practices to continue to strengthen our communities the older we get, whether it be higher education or even in the workplace?
Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here today. I can't wait to keep in touch and to follow where this book takes you all and our communities. So thank you. I'm so honored that you were here with us today. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.